So good afternoon and welcome to the next and probably the last in the series of videos on the BBC. And this is the second part of theory, of looking at then certain key concepts, not to make you experts in television studies, but to get you to have a slightly more sophisticated view. Now, I don't know if you saw on the television the other day here in France, the film Forrest Gump. And one of his well-known phrases is, life is like a box of chocolates. What you get out of it depends on what you put into it. It's a film which I cordially dislike, but that particular quotation is absolutely not true for television. That one of the things that people who study television have discovered is that what the producer or creator puts in and what the consumer or viewer or listener takes out are not necessarily the same thing. And that is what we're going to be looking at in just a moment, if I manage to click on the right buttons and get the technology into action. So concept number 3. Decoding, well, it simply means that it's not so simple. What the, as you know in literature, what the author puts into the book is not the same necessarily as what the reader gets out of the book. And this is also the case in television. The television maker, the program maker, has an idea, has an intention of what they want to go into the program, whether it's a sitcom or a soap opera. This is encoding. They encode their values, their priorities into the program, and then the viewer decodes, and they find in the program the ideas and priorities and values. But what is rather complicated is, first of all, the encoder, the producer, the creator, is not necessarily aware of everything they put in, as we know very well in literature. There's no reason to think that the author knows exactly what they're putting into their book. But many things could be unconscious, and I will be giving you an example in a moment. And on the other hand, the reader, or in this case the viewer, has a lot of choice about what they take out of. Now, I saw an example of this in museum studies recently, where they looked at a series of exhibitions on Captain Cook, the great explorer and colonial scout from the 18th century. And today there are many exhibitions about Captain Cook because it's the 250th anniversary. And many of the museums try not to do an old-fashioned exhibition. Captain Cook was a great colonial hero who brought the Enlightenment to the world, because that's not the modern way of looking at things. And they try to be somewhat critical of colonialism and so on and so forth. However, one very fine intellectual did a study of what people really find out when they go to the museum, and it was a little bit depressing, because they found out that they go into a museum and whatever the curator put into the exhibition, a majority of the people who go to the exhibition take out the ideas they already had. That they tend to notice the things that go in the same direction as their previous ideas. Stuart Hall is the most well-known. This will be the 80s or the 90s. I don't have the date there either. Very unprofessional of me. This encoding and decoding idea comes from semiotics, and in this idea, the focus is on how the media and the consumer work together. And in this model, the audience has a lot of power. So the ideas I mentioned at the beginning by Theodore Adorno is what we sometimes call the hypodermic needle theory. That is to say that you have, this is what's inside the television, and now it's inside me. That it's just the consumer is empty and they are filled up by the television. That's the hypodermic needle theory, or the Adorno theory, if you like. And Stuart Hall said, no, it's very active. And according to Stuart Hall, I quote, "A message must be perceived as meaningful discourse and be meaningfully decoded before it has an effect, a use, or satisfied a need." And he suggested that there were at least 3 ways that a viewer could interpret a program. they can read the dominant code, that is, that they take out of the program what the author tried to put in. Secondly, they can take out an oppositional code where it has the opposite effect, where the program has the opposite effect of what is intended. Perhaps the viewer says, oh, have you seen this documentary? It's obviously nonsense. They're saying that and they're hiding something. And the third one, which Stuart Hall said was very common, is what we call a negotiated code. And now the negotiated code is used by viewers who, I quote, acknowledge the legitimacy of the hegemonic definitions, while at a more restricted situational level, decide on exceptions to the rule. So let me give you an example, because that is a. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not here. I'm busy. Let me just turn the sound off there. Okay, right. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let me give you an example if I click on the right one. Yes, does anybody know who this person is? This is an extremely well-known television character from a long-running television program, television sitcom called "Till Death Do Us Part." "Till Death Do Us Part" is a quotation from the Church of England marriage ceremony. His name is Alf Garnet, and he is a very conservative person. The sitcom is not mostly about race or racism. It's mostly about the relationship of Alf Garnet with his son, who is much more modern, much more progressive, and so on. And they fight a lot. They're both presented as working class people. However, very frequently, Alf Garnet will say very racist things, sometimes about black people when they are present in the sitcom. I mean, the horrible old-fashioned racism, like, you're used to climbing trees, aren't you? This kind of thing. Yeah? And so this was very, very popular in the 1970s, and the question of its meaning is particularly important. The writer of the sitcom, Johnny Spates, was somebody who was opposed to racism, and he said, "My aim is to get people to laugh at this guy because he is a ridiculous racist." So that's what he declared. So that was what he thought he was putting into it. However, when the BBC did a study after many years, they did a study, and they never published the study. They never published the study because it became clear that the people who loved Alf Garnet most are the people who said, "Oh, he's absolutely right what he says about black people." So that's one example of where the encoding is supposed to be anti-racist, but the decoding was often racist. And if you look in more detail, I'm afraid I'm not. It's just too depressing to show you extracts of racist television programs. But if you want to find one, you can find an extract on YouTube. For example, I found a part where there's a black man who comes to fix the television in his house. And he starts saying horribly racist things about the man, and he continues for 2 or 3 minutes. Every new racist thing he says, you have laughter, taped laughter, canned laughter. And so what you're actually seeing is 3 minutes of insults of black people, laughter, 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 laughter. And so it seems to me, and many people have come to this conclusion, that the fact that the author of the television program is opposed to racism is not the important question here. What is actually happening, it seems to me, is that millions of people are watching 3 minutes of black people being insulted, which is being presented as funny. Yes, this is, no, I can't write them, but I can spell them. This is Alf Garnet, Garnet, Alf Garnet. and he appears in the sitcom, extremely popular sitcom. I think it was around for at least 10 years. The sitcom is called Till Death Do Us Part. Jusqu'à ce que la mort nous sépare. Extremely easy to find on YouTube. Even worse, if you like, Alf Garnet came out with jokes against black people, and it seems likely that the following day, the same jokes, the racist jokes, were being repeated in pubs all over England. And so, at least in my opinion, this was a program written by an anti-racist, or somebody who was against racism, which actually reinforced racism. And I do actually have a little bit of evidence. Of course, these are difficult things to prove, although, as I say, the BBC did a study, and they were rather unhappy because their official line, they were criticized. You know, people say, oh, well, there's a lot of racism in that program. The BBC said, yes, but we're laughing at the racists. Look at the end of every episode. At the end of every episode, the people who win in the situation is not Alf Garnet. He doesn't win. He gets ridiculous. He gets treated as ridiculous. However, look at him. Look at this picture of him. He's considered to be a bit of a clown, fundamentally a good man. And so this could be quite problematic. And when I was just looking on YouTube for it, I found this extract from Alf Garnet's Political Correctness and Alf Garnet, 266,000 views. And I don't know if you could, did you notice what is worrying about this? Or why I'm slightly worried about this? Anybody can catch that? Well, look, what is the channel it's on? You know that YouTube is divided into channels, and this is on GB4BNP. It's a fascist channel. The British National Party is a fascist organization, and here they are using Alf Garnet 40 years later to help their ways along. Okay, so this was the reason I wanted to mention that was to illustrate the question of encoding and decoding. I already mentioned this briefly last time in connection with the music programs. You remember the jukebox jury, where different audiences were getting different things from it. The teenagers were happy with jukebox jury because my music is on the television. The television was much more important than it is today. Whereas quite a lot of the parents were happy with the program because it was mocking the music. Yes, so you get the two groups of viewers were decoding the program in a completely different way. Just one more thing to say about Alf Garnet. This is the 1970s. There are 2 or 3 channels. There is no video recorder. There is no Netflix. There is no internet. So you're talking about 15 million people watching it, or 20 million people. So it has effects which can't be seen today. That will give you some more examples a bit later. The next, you are correct that the counting is not correct, but the next, I think number 1 was Adorno's theories, number 2 was the dangers of television, and number 3 was encoding and decoding, and number 4 is reinforcement. So what about reinforcement? Reinforcement is an important concept, and it is another idea which goes against the old-fashioned, if you like, idea that people just accept everything on the television and it fills up their head and so they can't think. This is reinforcement theory. This came from a book in 1960, The Effects of Mass Communication by Joseph T. Clapper. Have you seen that? I got the date. The effects of an analysis of research on the effectiveness and limitations of mass media in influencing the opinions, values, and behavior of their audiences. This is a book by Joseph Clapper. What should I say about this? Well, I think I've got a quotation from him, first of all. This is a quotation from some book or some article. So he proposed a reinforcement theory, and here you have the quotation. Whatever it is to be called, reinforcement theory is in essence a shift away from the tendency to regard mass communication as a necessary and sufficient cause of audience effects. And reinforcement theory is a move towards a view of the media as influences working amid other influences in a total situation. Clapper argued that the mass media does not have the ability to influence audiences. Regardless of whether the effect in question is social or individual, he wrote, the media are more likely to reinforce than to change. And in particular, and this is probably the most important element, Clapper argued that people's attitudes, beliefs, and behavior was more likely to be influenced by their family, schools, communities, religious institutions, trade unions, etc. And he argued that the only time that the media could really influence people was when the media introduced a new idea or a new concept. So this again is a bottom-up theory. The audience is in control, or more in control than the media. The audience is active, and it's the idea that the influence of the media, whether it's radio or television, has been much exaggerated. In fact, people are much more influenced by their friends, their husbands and wives, and their family, and their workmates, and so on and so forth. And indeed, this is something which is quite well known in political circles, that it's well known that you have more chance of changing somebody's mind politically if you are in person arguing with them in their workplace or on their doorstep, political parties come and knock on the door. That's more likely to influence them than simply them reading an article or watching a television program. So this is the idea of reinforcement. And the last concept, well, probably the most useful one, which I want to tell you about is, oh, sorry, I can't. I wanted to finish saying one more thing on Clapper, because Clapper also wrote about the question of whether media violence encourages people to become more aggressive. And he says that communications research strongly indicates that media depictions of crime and violence are not primary factors which move towards such content. The content seems to reinforce or implement existing behavioral tendencies. That is to say that violence on television can make people who were already a bit violent, it can make them more violent. And so the last one I want to look at is uses and gratifications. And this is probably the most, I think it's the most useful one. And this is an approach to try to understand why and how people actively seek out specific media to satisfy specific needs. That is to say, this asks the question, not what does the media do to you, but what do people do with media? That is to say, it suggests again that the audience is active, that they use it, and this is the difficulty, that it underlines the fact that you never really know why I don't know why this will not go on silent. Let me just switch it off, and that will teach them. You never really know why people are watching your program. Take the news, for example. Now, as you know, many people watch, if you take first of all the fiction, the cinema, you know, a lot of people watch war films because they find them entertaining. Even if this is, Game of Thrones, there's sometimes fighting, which is completely fictional, and so it's in a way purely entertaining. Now, the reality is that when you see war scenes on the news, many people find them entertaining too. Now, one of the interesting things about uses and gratifications theory is that it includes a lot of things that we feel like we shouldn't really feel, what we do. For example, one of the uses, and so it asks the question, what do you use it for, and what does it do for you? So, for example, the studies, that this is based on very careful studies, and one of the studies shows that people quite like watching very poor people on the television. and people with big, terrible problems, because it makes them feel better. Oh, I thought I had problems. You know, it was difficult for me to pay the bills last month, but look, these people on the television are starving. I feel better. Now, of course, these are not reactions that you're going to go and tell your friends about. Oh, I saw this great television program last night on the famine. I feel much better. And these are kind of intimate or psychological reactions, which are very real, but quite often private. This leads us into this question of the BBC and informing, educating, and entertaining people, because the BBC declares that its aim is to inform people, educate, or entertain people. But people don't just sit down and do what the BBC says. So one of the main theorists of uses and gratifications is Katz, K-A-T-Z. And he gives a whole series of uses which are possible. Social interaction, for example. Certainly in soap operas, and I'm thinking of British soap operas because that's what I know best. Viewers really think of some of the characters as their friends. I think you see this in other kinds of film as well. There's a very strong identification with things like Dr. House or some detective programs. A very strong identification. We almost feel like they're our friends. Almost feel like they are our friends. So that was one example. Another one is mood management. Quite often people put something on the television or indeed on the radio, because we don't remember we're talking about the BBC in general. So I just needed something to cheer me up. And so I put on, Ne pas oublier les paroles or something. That is to say that people are not necessarily doing something very simple with the media. And this is one of the things that is important about entertainment. This is a category which John Reed spoke about, entertainment. But in fact, that's just one word, but it can be many, many different different things. One of the uses posited by the theorists is what they call affective disposition. That is to say that people enjoy encouraging the goodie and hoping he wins. This is, of course, a gratification that we also know in football. If you watch unless you're a very strange person, if you watch a football game, you have to decide whose side you're on. Supposing it's, Romania against Hungary, and you have no particular reason to be for Romania or for Hungary. Apologies to the Hungarians and Romanians in the room. Then nevertheless, it's much more fun if you're on somebody's side. So this is something about the affective disposition theory, which states that people enjoy rooting for, supporting characters who are presented as good and moral and feeling good when bad things happen to the baddies. It's just a picture of some televisions. There you go. And here is just an example of goodies and baddies. This is the classic scene from Doctor Who. Doctor Who, then the Time Lord who travels through time in this series, which has lasted for many decades, certainly at least since the 60s. Although it's not like a soap opera, it's not continuous. This is the Dalek, who is the most famous baddie in Doctor Who. Sensation seeking, one of the uses and gratifications, the reason that people watch horror films is because they like to be very scared. And this can sometimes apply for television. There's not much extreme horror on television, but you do sometimes get things like that. Emotional involvement. This kind of thing. Also, what we call parasocial relations. That is, we watch the television because we enjoy talking to people about it. Now, this was stronger at the time. Can't happen today. I'm sure you all sometimes watch a Netflix series because everybody's talking about it, and you want to be able to talk about it too. This was even stronger in the classic days of television, especially in the 60s and 70s. From 1960 to 1985, almost everybody had 2, 3, or 4 channels. So when you went to and no internet or anything else, or Netflix or anything else. So when you went into work in the morning and you saw two people, you could say, did you see that on the television last night? And probably one of them would have. So this is something that's become much more difficult, because today, if I was to ask a whole group of students, what did you see on the screen last night? There's rather a lot with the box and the video on demand and Netflix and other things and social media. You know that it doesn't have as important role in parasocial relationships as it did. Finally, parasocial relationships, of course. No, I'll come back to that in a moment. Finally, something that they call vicarious experiences. Now, a vicarious experience is where you enjoy something that somebody else is doing, imagining you're doing it yourself. So we all love movies where comedies where poor people then win a lot of money and become millionaires, because we like to watch them. I wonder what I would do with $1 million. So the important thing about uses and gratifications theory then is it underlines the big variety of things which we do with the media. So it's very, very different from Adorno's idea, which, what do people do with the media? They become more stupid. What does the media do? It fills their head with rubbish. And even Pierre Bourdieu is, he's not saying exactly that, but he's tempted by that idea. Uses and gratifications theory is quite different. So there's many different things that we do with the media. Some of them very honourable. I've been watching a series of series of documentaries on women in the 19th century because I want to be educated, and some of them rather shameful. Watching if you feel better about your problems because you're watching programs with people with terrible problems. I'm feeling very ill. Oh, look, there's somebody dying of cancer. I feel better already. All these different things can go on, and of course these are not controlled by the producer. So I will come back to that in a moment. So there's been quite a lot of writing done. This is recent writing about usage gratifications, and so here we have a book, for example, online news channels, selection and use, usage gratifications and dependence. So dependence is another idea there, another interesting idea there. Now, in our classic period before 1995, we did not have 24-hour news, and so that kind of dependence was not available. Here's another one: a study of senior citizens' television news uses and gratifications. So it's just looking at old people and what do they expect to get when they switch on the news, and what do they really get? What use is it to them? So this is much more sophisticated. Well, the news, that's information. Before they are not informed, and afterwards they are informed. So it's much more sophisticated idea. And remember that news is very varied. You get the sports news, you get the celebrity news. It's not all really about information. And then you get those wonderful things like on the regional news, whether it be in the north of England in the 1970s or FR3 today. If you put on FR3, you get little human interest stories. Oh, the village that didn't have a baker and how they found a baker. And we love these stories. And they make it, they're more cheerful and so on. They do things for us which are not just informing or educating or entertaining. No, that's not the right one. This is the right one. Yes, so EastEnders is just one of the examples I wanted to give to say that. Oh dear, that's not good, is it? I just need to check something. No, I don't. I just need to check down here that everything is working okay. Yes, everything is working fine. So let me go back to where I was. Screen share. Screen share. I know. Let's do it again then. Window. EastEnders. Share. Oh yes, not so long this time. Yeah, I do have. So that was just an example because the soap operas are tremendously important because people, even today, British people are obsessed with soap operas. But in the 70s and 80s, it was even more so I remember telling you about British people going on holiday and phoning home. What happened on EastEnders? More. Coronation Street. No, more EastEnders. 10 years of EastEnders. Yes, as a final comment on uses and gratifications, I just want to look at this very, very well-known Wednesday play, Cathy Come Home, which was played in the 60s, or the late 60s, and it was very influential. In fact, so influential that there was a new charity for homeless people, Shelter, which was established a few months later, and which became a bit of a new kind of charity, because as well as helping homeless people, they also lobbied the government and campaigned to insist that the government should do more for homeless people. However, and this is what I wanted to say, although Ken Loach's objective was to raise awareness, to inform and educate people, to make them want to do things against homelessness. That's decoding, that's what was encoding. But you never know why people are watching it. People might be watching it to feel better about their own lives because these people are so terribly poor. And indeed, you know, you never know why people watch other kinds of films either, and it's not always completely honourable. And this is really my last concept then, number 6, the dominant gaze. So the dominant gaze, le regard du dominant, du dominateur, si vous voulez. And this comes from an intellectual known as Laura Mulvey. Now, Laura Mulvey, in fact, wrote about cinema, not about television. And she invented the idea of the male gaze, le regard masculin. And what does that mean? It simply means that because most films are made, even today, but especially at the time, are made by men, and who very often have men in mind, then women are not seen in the same way as men in films. And this includes both the story, the role, of course, the role of women is not the same, it's fairly obvious, but also the camera work. The way that women are filmed is not the same as the way that men are filmed. Different parts of their body, different kinds of close-ups. Now, this can be very subtle. Now, of course, it's not always very subtle. If you look at Top of the Pops and you have the singers, the dancers, the female dancers who are not wearing very much, then the camera work will not be very subtle in doing close-ups of parts of their body. But in many cases, it's much more subtle than that, and you just find that finally, somehow, the women are being filmed in a way that they do not appear to be so authoritative of the men. So Mulvey spoke about Hollywood women characters of the 1950s and the 1960s, and she said that women were coded with to be looked at-ness. Donc les femmes étaient là pour être regardées, ça se voyait, tandis que les hommes étaient ceux qui regardaient. And she goes into great detail, which I cannot go into now. That is Laura Mulvey, and you can find a couple of short interviews with her on YouTube. Now I do have an example, and with a bit of luck, I'll be able to do this, and you might even hear it. I'll need you to tell me if you can hear it. So let's see if I can do it on the other machine, if you like. Not yet, but in a minute. So let me go back to here. Oops. Oh dear. Big blue button. Share. Window. Oh. I think it's that one. Yes. Window this one. Okay. Yes. We'll go to this one. Shut up the sound. Oh, the sound has already turned up. Oh, the sound here. Oh, there you go. Can you hear?
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, children. Welcome to the Generation Game. Nice to see you. To see you. There we are. We've never seen our studio audience before, but you do look lovely. Before the show, you know, people back home, we gave them a paper hat, a bottle of champagne, and some... Full shows, I'll say no more. I know you're dying to meet her, and so why not have a look at her again? Here she is, a little bit different this week, but did you notice the gorgeous, lovely Christmas Anthea Redford? Oh, yeah. Well, let's meet the eight. Who are the
Okay, so this is just a random example, but there are, you know, you could choose hundreds of examples. I have to turn this down. You could choose hundreds of examples of some of the ways that women were treated, and still sometimes are, but considerably less in the television. This is the 1970s. You'll not be particularly surprised to hear this is the 1970s, and it is pretty dire. So you can see what happened. Yes, the gentleman came in and introduced himself. And was obviously the person who was going to make things happen. Whereas the lady's role was quite simply to be decorative and, you know, come in, do a little turn so we can see how beautiful you are on every side. And at that point, there was a joke where she was so beautiful that all these men came on stage and wanted to jump on her. This is what people considered funny in the 1970s. No, somebody's written something and I can't see it, but I'll put this on. Good, fine. Okay, so now let me get back to where I was with a bit of luck. Oh, there you go. Yes, so this was just an example, if you like, of the male gaze. Although there are many more examples that you could have. This is the idea. Her first book was Laura Mulvey's first book was called Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. And it was the subject of much discussion. Critics of her position said that how can this be, this might not be the whole story, because in that case, why do women also enjoy Hollywood films? And this is a debate which continues. Mulvey suggested that women watching films change their position regularly between identifying with the men and identifying with the women. And so there are many examples, of course, where the male gaze is very present, but this has also been suggested that It's also been suggested that dominant gazes are not necessarily just male, that we can talk about a white gaze where anything black, anybody black is seen as exceptional, not normal, or indeed a heterosexual gaze. And indeed, here we have an example, which I'm not going to show you. It would be an example. This is Frank Spencer, who is a character in again, a very popular sitcom, Some Mothers Do Have 'em. Il y a des mères qui en ont des fils bizarres. Il faut comprendre. Some mothers do have 'em. And the central joke of this whole program was that Frank Spencer is very effeminate. So this is just the only joke, in fact, in the whole thing. And similarly, in the Monty Python sketch, this is a Monty Python sketch about a bishop. You see the bishop? No, sorry, it's not Monty Python. This is a Dave Allen sketch. Dave Allen was a tremendously popular comedian, sometimes very funny. You can find his stuff on YouTube. A little old-fashioned, of course, and you'll probably find that 1970s humor is much slower than today's humor, although, you know, even than today's French humor. There you go. I said it. Oops. So here you have the bishop. And what happens in the sketch, which is supposed to be funny, is that the bishop is walking out with his tremendous hat and these colorful clothes, and these two men who are supposed to be homosexuals, you can tell because one has a mustache and the other one is dressed in pink. And in the 1970s, that was enough. They run up to him and they say, "Oh, I love your dress. Come with us and tell us where you got your dress from." And so this is a homophobic joke where what's supposed to be funny is that gay men are like women, obsessed with clothes in particular. So this is one example of perhaps a heterosexual gaze, because the whole thing is aimed at gays. Okay, now that is the end of what I have to say about theoretical considerations and the BBC. Now that's very, very far from a full theoretical standpoint on the BBC, but that's not something you're expected to have. But it would be a tremendously positive point if in your writings at the Agrégation you were firstly to problematize some ideas and not just say, "Oh, entertainment, that's a problem," and point out that uses and gratifications theory posits that there are many different ways of using entertainment, or that the coding of programs is not the same as the decoding of programs. If you mention one or two of these ideas, this is definitely a positive point, and indeed mentioning what Bourdieu had to say, and perhaps some of its weaknesses, that he speaks mostly about the news. So I think that all of that would be very useful. I mean, the jury of the Agrégation is not made up of experts on television theory, but it's made up of people who will be happy to see you use some of these ideas.
And that indeed is all we have time for. And this may even be the very last of the videos in the series. I think it is. So thank you very much for listening to my videos. I've been looking at how many views have I had this month. I feel like an influencer. Let's not get carried away. So best of luck. If you're taking the Agrégation interne, then best of luck at the end of January. And if you're taking the externe, best of luck a little bit later. And if you want to see more of my videos that are on the YouTube channel, The History Fellow, or you can find my my webpage connected with the University of Hall. So goodbye for now. I just need to press on the right buttons and we'll be fine. Arrêtez de partager. Fin. Arrêtez la réunion pour tous.